The crimson sky of Zerion Prime burned with the fury of three suns, as Queen Vextara stood atop her crystalline war fortress. Her towering 8-foot frame cast shadows across the battlefield, where her Zephyrian warriors clashed with the pathetic humans who dared challenge her empire. Her forearms moved with deadly precision, each wielding a plasma blade that could cut through starship hulls like paper. "These soft-skinned vermin think they can stand against the Zephyrian dominion," she hissed through her mandibles, her violet eyes scanning the chaos below. For 3 centuries she had conquered 17 star systems, crushing every species that opposed her rule. Humans were supposed to be the weakest of all. No natural weapons, no thick carapaces, no enhanced strength. They relied on primitive tools and foolish courage. Among the human forces, Sergeant Marcus Chen crouched behind a fallen Zephyrian war machine, his rifle almost empty. The evacuation ships were still loading civilians from the colony below. They needed more time, but the Queen's forces were overwhelming them. Through his scope, he could see her commanding from her fortress, untouchable and magnificent in her alien fury. Marcus had studied every available file on Queen Vextara during the long journey to Zerion Prime. She was born into the warrior caste, rose through the ranks by defeating challengers in single combat, and united the scattered Zephyrian clans under her iron rule. Her tactical genius was matched only by her personal prowess in battle. Military analysts called her unstoppable. The Queen's voice boomed across the battlefield through her armor's speakers, speaking in heavily accented standard. "Humans, your pathetic resistance ends now. Surrender, and I will grant you swift deaths instead of the agony your species deserves." She had particular hatred for humans, ever since the Battle of Kepler Station, where human defenders had used suicide attacks to destroy her beloved war sister's flagship. The loss of Zexitana had filled her heart with burning rage against these seemingly weak creatures who fought with such desperate ferocity. Marcus watched through his scope as Queen Vextara leaped from her fortress, her forearms spinning plasma blades in complex patterns as she descended toward the human lines. Her personal guard followed, but she was clearly planning to lead the charge herself. This was his chance. Not to kill her, but to buy time for the evacuation. The human sergeant had fought the Zephyrians for 2 years, ever since they began their expansion into human space. He had seen colonies burned, friends die, and families torn apart by this war, but studying Zephyrian culture had taught him something important. They respected courage above all else. If he could challenge her honor directly, she might pause long enough for the civilians to escape. Standing from his cover, Marcus dropped his rifle and drew his combat knife. A pitiful weapon against a Zephyrian queen, but it was all he had. "Queen Vextara," he shouted across the battlefield, "I challenge you to single combat for the right of these civilians to evacuate." The queen landed with earth-shaking force just 50 meters away, her violet eyes focusing on the lone human who dared face her. For a moment, the entire battlefield fell silent as both sides watched this impossible confrontation. A human challenging a Zephyrian queen was either the height of courage or the depths of madness. "You would face me, little soft skin?" Vextara's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement. "I have crushed warriors twice your size. Your weapon cannot even scratch my carapace." Marcus kept his knife raised, knowing full well how outmatched he was. "Maybe not. But I'm human, and we don't back down when people need protecting. That's something your warrior culture should understand." Queen Vexitara studied him with predatory interest. In all her conquests, no enemy had ever challenged her so directly while being so obviously outclassed. The human's stance was textbook military. His eyes showed no fear despite facing certain death, and his voice carried the kind of conviction that had made her people respect strength above all else. "Very well, human. I accept your challenge." She deactivated 3 of her 4 plasma blades, keeping only 1 active. "But when I kill you, your people will witness what happens to those who defy the Zephyrian dominion." Behind Marcus, he could hear the evacuation ships lifting off. The civilians were safe. His mission was already accomplished, but now he had to survive long enough to make his sacrifice meaningful. The queen began circling him like a predator, her remaining blade humming with deadly energy. The first exchange was devastating. Vextara's speed was inhuman, her blade carving through the air where Marcus had been standing milliseconds before. Only his combat training and desperate reflexes kept him alive as he rolled, dodged, and tried to find any opening against his towering opponent. But something strange was happening. The queen was holding back, not delivering killing blows when she could have. Was she toying with him, or was there something else? Marcus realized she was actually engaging him as an equal opponent, testing his skill rather than simply crushing him. For 10 minutes, they danced their deadly dance across the battlefield while both armies watched in stunned silence. Marcus landed several hits with his knife, though they barely scratched the queen's natural armor. But each strike proved his determination, his refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. Then, disaster struck. A Zephyrian sniper, impatient with his queen's seemingly playful engagement, fired a plasma bolt meant to end the human quickly. Queen Vextera saw the shot coming and made a choice that would change everything. She intercepted the bolt meant for Marcus, taking the full blast across her torso. The mighty queen staggered, her violet blood flowing freely as she collapsed to one knee. Her own warriors had violated the sacred nature of single combat, dishonoring her in the worst possible way. As consciousness faded from her eyes, the last thing she saw was the human she had been fighting rushing toward her, not with a weapon to finish her off, but with hands outstretched to help. Marcus Chen caught Queen Vexitara as she fell, her massive 8-foot frame surprisingly light in the reduced gravity of Zerion Prime. Violet blood stained his uniform as he struggled to support her weight, but he didn't let go. Around them, both armies stood frozen in shock at what they were witnessing. A human soldier cradling the wounded Zephyrian queen who had been his mortal enemy moments before. "Why?" Vextera whispered through her mandibles, her violet eyes struggling to focus on Marcus's face. The plasma burn across her torso was severe, eating through her natural carapace armor and into the soft tissue beneath. She should have been dead already, but Zephyrian physiology was remarkably resilient. "Because leaving someone to die isn't what humans do," Marcus replied, his hands already working to seal the wound with emergency medical foam from his kit. "Not even enemies who were trying to kill us 5 minutes ago." The queen's warriors were approaching with weapons raised, unsure whether to rescue their leader or execute the human who dared touch her. Their culture had no framework for this situation. In Zephyrian society, showing mercy to a defeated enemy was considered weakness, and accepting help from an inferior species was ultimate shame. "Stay back," Vextera commanded with whatever strength remained in her voice. "This human saved my life. Honor demands. I hear his words." Sub-Commander Kexvol, the Queen's most trusted lieutenant, lowered his plasma rifle, but kept his 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with obvious hostility. "My queen, this soft skin seeks to capture you. We should eliminate him immediately and retrieve your body for proper funeral rites." Marcus continued working on the queen's wounds, his field medic training taking over despite the alien physiology he was dealing with. The plasma burn was deep, but if he could stop the bleeding and prevent shock, she might survive long enough to reach medical facilities. "I'm not trying to capture anyone," Marcus said without looking up from his work. "Your queen fought with honor. She saved my life when your sniper broke the rules of combat. Now I'm returning the favor." Queen Vexitara studied the human's face as he worked. His hands were steady, his movements efficient and purposeful. There was no deception in his eyes, no hidden agenda. For a species she had considered weak and treacherous, this individual showed remarkable integrity under pressure. "You could have let me die," she observed, wincing as Marcus applied pressure to slow the bleeding. "My death would have thrown the Dominion into chaos. Your people would benefit greatly from my destruction." Marcus finally met her gaze, his brown eyes serious. "Maybe. But that's not who I am, and it's not who humanity is. We fight when we have to, but we don't leave people to die when we can help them. Even if they're enemies." The Queen's mandibles clicked in confusion. "This makes no tactical sense. In war, you eliminate advantages for your enemies. My survival strengthens the Dominion against your species." "Yeah, probably," Marcus admitted, continuing to work on her wounds. "But there's more to existence than just tactical advantages. There's doing what's right even when it cost you." Behind them, more human forces were arriving, but Marcus waved them back. The situation was too delicate for sudden movements or aggressive postures. One wrong move could turn this into a massacre for both sides. Queen Vexitara felt something she had never experienced before, genuine confusion about her own beliefs. The human's actions contradicted everything she understood about warfare, survival, and the natural order of strong dominating weak. Yet his behavior demonstrated a different kind of strength, one that transcended mere physical power. "Your evacuation ships have escaped," she noted. her voice growing stronger as the medical phone began working. Your objective is complete. Why do you remain here? Placing yourself in danger for one who has ordered the deaths of your people. Marcus paused in his work, considering his answer carefully. Because sometime wars end, Your Majesty. And when they do, what matters isn't who won the most battles, but whether we kept our humanity throughout the fighting. If I let you die when I could save you, I lose something important about who I am. The human's words struck something deep in the Queen's psyche. In Zephyrian culture, warriors gained honor through conquest and dominance. But this human spoke of a different kind of honor, one that came from maintaining principles even when facing enemies. It was a concept that challenged her fundamental understanding of strength. My warriors will not understand this, Vextara warned. They may attack you regardless of my commands. Your compassion may be rewarded with death. Marcus smiled grimly. Wouldn't be the first time, but that's a chance I'll take. Besides, I'm starting to think there's more to Zephyrian honor than I realized. You intercepted that shot meant for me when you could have let me die. The Queen's eyes widened slightly. She had acted on instinct when she saw the plasma bolt coming, defending her opponent in single combat from outside interference. But analyzing her actions afterward, she realized the human was right. She had chosen to protect him when she could have simply allowed the sniper to end their fight. That was different, she protested weakly. The combat was sacred. Outside interference violated honor. And this is different too, Marcus replied. You're wounded and helpless. Letting you die would violate something important in human honor. Maybe our species aren't as different as we thought. Sub-Commander Kexeval was growing impatient with the extended conversation. My queen, your injuries require immediate medical attention that only our technology can provide. We must evacuate you to the fleet immediately. Queen Vexitara looked between her subordinate and the human who had saved her life. A decision was forming in her mind, one that would have consequences far beyond this single battlefield. Kexeval, you will extend the same protection to this human that you would provide to me. He has earned honor through his actions today. The sub-commander's mandibles clicked in protest. My queen, this is unprecedented. The softskins are our enemies. Protecting one of them violates every protocol of the Dominion. Then perhaps our protocols require examination, Vextara replied, her strength returning as the medical treatment took effect. She struggled to her feet with Marcus supporting her weight. This human has shown me that strength can take many forms. Today I learned something new about the nature of true power. Marcus helped steady her as Zephyrian medical drones arrived and began more advanced treatment of her wounds. The immediate crisis was over, but both of them sensed that something fundamental had changed in the dynamic between their species. What happens now? Marcus asked as the Queen's natural color began returning to her carapace. Queen Vexistara looked at him with new respect. Now, human Marcus Chen, you and I must have a very long conversation about the future of this war. Your actions today have raised questions that demand answers. 3 days later, Marcus Chen found himself in the most unlikely place imaginable. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship Dominion's Wrath, sitting across from Queen Vexitara in her private chambers. The room was a study in alien grandeur, with crystalline walls that shifted color based on the Queen's mood and furniture designed for her imposing 8-foot frame. The Queen's wounds were healing rapidly thanks to advanced Zephyrian medical technology, but Marcus could see she was still favoring her left side where the plasma burn had been deepest. She wore ceremonial armor rather than battle gear, its intricate engravings telling the story of her conquests across 17 star systems. Your people must think you are dead, Vexitara observed, pouring a luminescent blue liquid into 2 cups from a crystal decanter. My warriors reported that you were taken prisoner after the battle. Marcus accepted the cup cautiously, unsure if the contents were safe for human consumption. Yeah, my commanding officers probably figure I'm being tortured for information right about now. They'll be planning rescue missions that'll never work. The Queen's mandibles clicked with what Marcus was learning to recognize as amusement. Perhaps we should contact them soon. But first I must understand something about your species that troubles me greatly. Over the past 3 days, Queen Vextara had been forced to confront uncomfortable truths about the war she was waging. Her medical staff had reported that Marcus carried no hidden weapons, no tracking devices, no means of espionage. He had genuinely saved her life with no expectation of reward or advantage. This reality challenged everything she believed about inferior species and the nature of warfare. Ask away, Marcus said, taking a careful sip of the blue liquid. It tasted like cinnamon mixed with starlight, if that was possible. Though I should warn you, humans are pretty complicated even to other humans. Why did your people resist our expansion so fiercely at Kepler Station? Vextara asked, her violet eyes intense. Your forces were outnumbered 10-1. Surrender would have saved countless lives. Instead, your warriors chose death over submission. Marcus set down his cup, remembering the reports from that battle. Because Kepler Station wasn't just a military outpost. It was home to 3 million civilians, including families who had nowhere else to go. When you gave the ultimatum to surrender or be destroyed, you weren't just asking soldiers to give up. You were asking parents to hand over their children to an unknown fate. The Queen leaned back in her chair, processing this information. In Zephyrian culture, civilians serve the state. Their safety is secondary to military objectives. We assumed your civilians held similar value to your leadership. That's where you're wrong, Marcus replied firmly. In human society, the whole point of having a military is to protect civilians. Soldiers exist to serve the people, not the other way around. When you threatened those families, you guaranteed that every human at Kepler Station would fight to the death. Queen Vextara's chambers darkened as her emotional state influenced the crystalline walls. The concept Marcus described was alien to her understanding of proper social order. In the Dominion, the strong ruled the weak, and the weak existed to serve the strong. The idea of powerful warriors sacrificing themselves for those beneath them seemed like madness. This explains much about your tactics, she mused. Your species fights with desperation that seems irrational from a purely military perspective. But if you truly believe in protecting the weak, it's not just belief, Marcus interrupted. It's fundamental to who we are. A human civilization that doesn't protect its people isn't worth preserving. That's why we'll keep fighting your expansion no matter how outgunned we are. The Queen rose and moved to a large viewport showing the swirling gases of the nebula where her fleet was hiding. Her forearms moved in complex gestures that Marcus recognized as a form of stress response among her people. Your words trouble me, Marcus Chen, she said without turning around. If what you say is true, then this war cannot end with simple conquest. Your people will never submit as long as they perceive us as threats to their weak. Probably not, Marcus agreed, but that doesn't mean the war has to continue forever. Understanding why we fight is the first step toward finding a way to stop fighting. Queen Vextara turned back to face him, her violet eyes reflecting an internal struggle. 3 days ago, I would have called such thinking weakness. The strong survive by dominating the weak. This is the natural order of the universe. Maybe, Marcus said carefully. But what if there's more than one kind of strength? You've conquered 17 star systems through military might. That's one kind of power. But my medic training lets me save lives even when I can't win fights. That's a different kind of strength. The Queen considered this, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. You propose that your compassion is a form of power. This concept seems paradoxical. Marcus leaned forward, sensing an opportunity to bridge the gap between their worldviews. Think about what happened on the battlefield. When you intercepted that plasma bolt meant for me, what drove that decision? Was it weakness or strength? Vextara paused, clearly struggling with the question. I acted to preserve the honor of single combat. Outside interference was unacceptable. Right. You had the strength to uphold your principles even when it put you at personal risk. That's the same kind of strength that made me help you instead of leaving you to die. We both chose to do what we believed was right, despite the tactical disadvantages. The Queen's chambers gradually lightened as her emotional state shifted. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, she was considering the possibility that her understanding of power might be incomplete. Your species has shown remarkable resilience, she admitted. Despite being outmatched in every military engagement, you continue to inflict significant casualties on our forces. Perhaps there is strategic value in understanding your motivations. Now you're thinking like a true general, Marcus said with a slight smile. Understanding your enemy is the first rule of warfare. But maybe, if you understand us well enough, we won't have to be enemies anymore. Queen Vextara returned to her seat, her forearms moving in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as deep contemplation. This possibility intrigues me. But my people have built their entire civilization around conquest and dominance. Changing such fundamental beliefs would require extraordinary evidence. Then maybe we should start gathering that evidence, Marcus suggested. I know my people would be willing to demonstrate that humans can be valuable allies rather than just stubborn enemies. The question is whether the Zephyrian Dominion is strong enough to consider a new path. The Queen's eyes flashed with something that might have been the beginning of hope. You challenge my people's strength by suggesting we lack the courage to change course. This is either very clever psychological manipulation or genuine belief in the possibility of peace. Bit of both, probably, Marcus admitted. But mostly I just think we're both tired of watching good people die in a war that might not be necessary. Queen Vextara stood and moved to a communication console. Then perhaps it is time to take the first step toward understanding. I will contact your military leadership and arrange proper diplomatic channels. If your species truly values protecting the weak, then prove your strength by convincing your warriors to risk trusting their greatest enemy. The emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council was unlike anything in the organization's history. Admiral Sarah Chen, Marcus's older sister, stared at the holographic display showing the impossible scene. Her little brother sitting calmly aboard a Zephyrian flagship, apparently unharmed and engaged in diplomatic conversation with the alien queen who had terrorized human space for 2 years. This has to be some kind of trick, growled General Morrison, his weathered face creased with suspicion. The Zephyrians don't negotiate. They conquer or destroy. There's no precedent for this kind of contact. Admiral Chen studied her brother's face on the display, looking for signs of coercion or mind control. But Marcus appeared relaxed, alert, and genuinely engaged in dialogue. She had known him all his life, and this didn't look like someone being forced to perform under duress. What exactly are they proposing? Asked Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the Council's chief xenobiologist. As the leading expert on Zephyrian society, her insights were crucial for understanding this unprecedented situation. Queen Vextara's massive form dominated the other side of the communication link, her forearms moving in complex patterns as she spoke. Your warrior Marcus Chen has presented concepts about human motivation that require investigation. I propose a temporary cessation of hostilities while we conduct experiments in cooperation. The word experiments sent a chill through the assembled military leadership. Zephyrian experiments on captured humans had been the stuff of nightmares, involving studies of pain tolerance, psychological breaking points, and combat effectiveness under extreme stress. Marcus seemed to sense their concern and leaned forward in his chair. It's not what you're thinking. The Queen wants to test whether humans and Zephyrians can work together effectively, rather than just fighting. She's proposing joint operations against common threats to see if cooperation produces better results than conquest. Common threats? Admiral Chen asked, her strategic mind immediately seeking the tactical implications. What kind of common threats? Queen Vextara's mandibles clicked as she consulted a data tablet. The void crawlers have been detected in the outer rim systems. Their swarm ships have already consumed 3 uninhabited worlds and show signs of exponential reproduction. This threat requires immediate attention from all sapient species. The mention of void crawlers silenced the room immediately. The mysterious entities had appeared at the edge of known space 6 months ago, consuming everything in their path and showing no interest in communication or negotiation. Early scouting reports suggested they were some kind of machine intelligence focused purely on resource consumption and self-replication. You're saying the Dominion can't handle the crawlers alone? General Morrison asked with obvious skepticism. I am saying that pride should not prevent intelligent beings from recognizing superior tactical solutions, the Queen replied with dignity. Preliminary engagements suggest the void crawlers adapt quickly to Zephyrian combat doctrine. Your species' unpredictable tactics might provide strategic advantages my forces lack. Dr. Warren leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding military caution. Your Majesty, what specifically have you observed about human tactics that interest the Dominion? Queen Vextara exchanged a glance with Marcus before answering. Your warriors demonstrate exceptional creativity under pressure and willingness to sacrifice individual advantage for collective benefit. These traits produce tactical innovations that are difficult for conventional military doctrine to predict or counter. Marcus nodded in agreement. What she means is that humans are really good at improvising and thinking outside established patterns. Zephyrian doctrine is incredibly effective, but it follows predictable principles. The void crawlers have already started adapting to those patterns. Admiral Chen studied the tactical implications carefully. The Zephyrian military was technologically superior to human forces in every measurable way, but they had struggled against human resistance specifically because of unpredictable human behavior. If the void crawlers were proving similarly adaptable, then combining human creativity with Zephyrian technology might indeed be strategically valuable. "What kind of joint operations are you proposing?" she asked. Queen Vextara activated a holographic display showing star charts of the affected region. Mixed crews on reconnaissance missions initially. Human tactical officers working with Zephyrian technical specialists to develop new approaches to void ship engagement. If these prove successful, larger collaborative efforts. The proposal was unprecedented in human-alien relations, but the council members could see the potential advantages. Access to Zephyrian technology combined with human tactical innovation could produce significant advances in military capability. There would need to be safeguards, General Morrison insisted. Guarantees of safe return for human personnel, protection against espionage, clear protocols for disengagement if cooperation fails. "Agreed," the Queen replied immediately. "I propose Marcus Chen serve as primary liaison, since he has demonstrated ability to understand both human and Zephyrian perspectives. His safety will be guaranteed by my personal honor." Marcus looked slightly surprised at being volunteered for extended diplomatic duty, but nodded acceptance. "I'm willing to continue in this role if it helps both our species survive the void crawler threat." Dr. Warren raised an important question. "Your Majesty, how do we know this isn't an elaborate deception designed to learn human military secrets?" Queen Vextara's chambers darkened slightly, indicating emotional response. "Doctor, 3 days ago I would have considered such deception appropriate and necessary. But this human saved my life when he could have allowed me to die for strategic advantage. His actions have forced me to reconsider assumptions about inferior species and the nature of strength." She paused, her violet eyes fixing on each council member in turn. "If humans can demonstrate mercy toward enemies who have killed their people, then perhaps Zephyrians can demonstrate trust toward those we previously considered unworthy of respect." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The mighty queen of the Zephyrian dominion was essentially admitting that human behavior had challenged her fundamental worldview and forced her to question centuries of cultural assumptions. "Admiral, Chen made the decision that would change the course of galactic history. We'll agree to limited joint operations on a trial basis. But Marcus, if anything seems wrong, anything at all, you signal us immediately and we extract you regardless of diplomatic consequences." "Understood," Marcus replied. "But honestly, I think this might actually work. The Queen's people respect strength, and we've shown them a different kind of strength than they expected. Now we get to find out if that's enough to build something better than endless war." Queen Vextara's mandibles clicked approvingly. "Then let us begin this experiment in cooperation, human warriors. The void crawlers will not wait for us to resolve our philosophical differences." As the communication ended, Admiral Chen looked around the room at her fellow commanders. They had just agreed to trust their greatest enemy with the lives of human personnel and access to military secrets. It was either the beginning of a new age in galactic relations or the most sophisticated trap in military history. "God help us all," she muttered under her breath, hoping her little brother's instincts about alien honor were better than her own fears about alien treachery. 2 weeks later, the joint operation was underway aboard the Zephyrian scout ship Silent Talon, cutting through hyperspace toward the contested zone where void crawler activity had been detected. The ship's crew was unlike anything in galactic history. 10 humans working alongside 20 Zephyrian warriors in an experiment that both species watched with nervous anticipation. Marcus stood in the ship's command center, watching Lieutenant Commander Jessica Park argue tactics with Sub-Commander Kexval over a holographic battle display. The Zephyrian officer's forearms gestured emphatically as he outlined traditional fleet engagement doctrine, while the human pilot pointed out weaknesses in formation structure. "Your approach is too rigid," Park insisted, her finger tracing new patterns through the hologram. "You're treating the void crawlers like they're another military force with predictable objectives. But they're not trying to win territory or achieve political goals. They just want to consume resources and reproduce." Kexval's mandibles clicked with frustration. Rigid doctrine ensures coordinated action among large forces. Improvisation leads to chaos and breakdown of command structure. This is fundamental military principle. "Maybe for fighting other military forces," Park replied. "But when you're dealing with swarm intelligence that adapts to your patterns, being predictable is suicide. We need to be random, chaotic, impossible to predict or counter." Marcus watched the debate with fascination. Over the past 2 weeks, he had observed similar conversations throughout the ship, as human and Zephyrian crew members struggled to understand each other's approaches to problem-solving. The humans consistently favored flexibility and innovation, while the Zephyrians emphasized coordination and proven methods. Queen Vextara approached the display, her massive frame commanding immediate attention from both officers. Sub-Commander Kexval, explain why Zephyrian doctrine emphasizes predictable patterns. My queen, coordinated action among large forces requires standardized responses to known situations. When every warrior knows precisely how their comrades will react, complex maneuvers become possible without extensive communication. A logical approach, the Queen acknowledged. Commander Park, explain why human doctrine favors unpredictability. Because real combat is never like training scenarios, Your Majesty. The enemy does unexpected things. Equipment fails, intelligence is wrong, and plans fall apart. When that happens, the side that adapts faster usually wins. Queen Vextara studied both perspectives carefully. In the weeks since Marcus had saved her life, she had been forced to reconsider many assumptions about proper military thinking. Human forces consistently performed better than predicted against Zephyrian technology, suggesting their chaotic methods had genuine tactical value. Perhaps both approaches have merit, she suggested. Sub-Commander, what would happen if our forces could maintain coordination while also demonstrating unpredictability to enemies? Kexval's 4 eyes widened as he considered the implications. Such combination would be theoretically advantageous, but achieving coordination without predictability seems contradictory. Not contradictory, Park interrupted, excitement building in her voice. Complimentary. Your people are amazing at executing complex plans flawlessly. Our people are good at making new plans when the old ones stop working. Together we could execute brilliant improvisations. The concept was beginning to crystallize in Marcus's mind as well. Like jazz music, he said, drawing confused looks from the Zephyrians. Jazz musicians have incredible technical skill, but they use that skill to improvise together in real time. Each musician knows what the others can do, so they can predict capabilities without predicting specific actions. Queen Vextara's chambers began shifting to brighter colors as her interest increased. You suggest that understanding capabilities rather than memorizing responses might allow coordination with improvisation? Exactly, Marcus replied. If a Zephyrian pilot knows that a human pilot will always try something unexpected, but will never abandon their wingman, then they can coordinate without knowing exactly what the human will do. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent alarm from the ship's sensor station. Ensign Rodriguez, the human electronics specialist, was bent over his displays with obvious concern. Contact bearing 27 Mark 15, multiple signatures, composition unknown, closing rapidly. Sub-Commander Kexval moved immediately to his battle stations. All warriors prepare for engagement. Activate defensive screens and charge primary weapons. But Commander Park was already studying the sensor readings with a different perspective. Wait, look at their approach pattern. They're not maneuvering tactically. They're just coming straight at us like we're food. Queen Vextara examined the data carefully. The approaching ship showed none of the careful positioning or strategic formation that would indicate military intelligence. They moved like predators pursuing prey, focused entirely on reaching their target with minimal regard for defensive concerns. Void crawlers, she confirmed grimly. 12 vessels, destroyer-class equivalents. They will attempt to overwhelm our defenses through numerical superiority and close engagement. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he realized this would be the first real test of human Zephyrian cooperation under combat conditions. Everything they had discussed about combining approaches was about to be tested against an enemy that had already proven capable of adapting to conventional tactics. Standard doctrine? Kexval asked, awaiting orders. Queen Vextara looked between her traditional subordinate and the humans who had challenged her thinking. No. We implement experimental hybrid tactics. Sub-Commander, execute defensive formation Gamma 7 with maximum weapon coordination. Commander Park, she continued, your forces will provide tactical improvisation within that framework. Surprise me with solutions I cannot predict. The next few minutes became a blur of coordinated chaos as the silent Talon engaged the Void Crawler swarm. Zephyrian gunners laid down precise fields of fire that channeled the enemy ships into predicted zones, while human pilots used those zones as staging areas for completely unpredictable attack runs. Lieutenant Park's fighter spun through impossibly tight maneuvers that no Zephyrian pilot would attempt, drawing 3 crawler ships into pursuing her directly into Kexvol's crossfire. Meanwhile, Ensign Rodriguez used human-designed electronic warfare techniques to confuse crawler sensors at precisely the moment Zephyrian weapons achieved optimal firing solutions. The battle was over in 12 minutes. All 12 Void Crawler vessels were destroyed with 0 casualties to the Silent Talon, despite being outnumbered and outgunned. The hybrid tactics had produced a level of effectiveness that neither species could have achieved alone. In the aftermath, as both human and Zephyrian crew members reviewed combat recordings, the magnitude of what had been accomplished became clear. They had found a way to combine the best aspects of both military doctrines into something entirely new. Queen Vextara stood before the assembled crew, her violet eyes reflecting something that might have been pride. Warriors of both species, you have demonstrated that strength can be multiplied through understanding rather than dominance. This achievement will reshape how the Dominion approaches future conflicts. Marcus looked around at the mixed crew, seeing humans and Zephyrians working together with growing respect and trust. The experiment was succeeding beyond anyone's most optimistic predictions, but he also knew this was just the beginning. If word of their success reached both governments, it would trigger changes throughout human and Zephyrian space that neither species was fully prepared to handle. The Zephyrian High Council chamber had not seen such turmoil in 3 centuries. Ancient stone pillars carved with the histories of conquest trembled as voices raised in heated debate, while Queen Vexitera stood before the assembled war-caste leaders defending the most controversial decision in Dominion history. "The soft skins have corrupted your mind," roared General Thexkar, his forearms striking the air in fury. 300 years of glorious conquest and you would abandon our destiny for the sake of these inferior beings? Queen Vextara faced the council with calm dignity, though Marcus could see the tension in her mandibles as she maintained composure. She had brought him to witness this gathering as living proof of human capabilities, but many council members seemed to view his presence as an insult to Zephyrian honor. "I have not abandoned conquest, General," the Queen replied evenly. "I have discovered a more effective form of it. The joint operations against Void Crawler forces have achieved success rates 93% higher than traditional Dominion tactics alone." War leader Zexmorth, ancient even by Zephyrian standards, clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Temporary tactical advantages do not justify fundamental changes to our civilization. The strong rule the weak. This is natural law, not mere preference." Marcus had been briefed on the political situation during the journey to the Dominion capital world. Queen Vextara's authority was absolute in military matters, but changes to fundamental social doctrine required approval from the High Council. Half the assembled leaders supported her innovations, while the other half viewed cooperation with humans as betrayal of everything Zephyrian. "War leader Zexmorth speaks wisdom," interjected Commander Vexhala, her scarred carapace telling stories of a dozen major campaigns. "But perhaps we must redefine what constitutes strength. These humans demonstrate capabilities that pure physical power cannot match." She gestured toward Marcus with one of her 4 arms. "This single soft skin prevented our queen's death when our own warriors failed to protect her." His action showed strength that transcends traditional measurements. The chamber erupted in angry clicking and shouting as factions argued over the implications. Marcus remained silent, knowing that speaking without permission would violate Zephyrian protocol and potentially undermine the Queen's position. General Thexkar's voice cut through the chaos. "One human showing unexpected behavior does not justify treating their entire species as equals. They remain physically inferior, technologically dependent, and numerically insignificant compared to the Dominion. Yet they have resisted our expansion for 2 years," Queen Vexitara pointed out calmly. "Despite overwhelming disadvantages in every conventional measure of military power, this resistance demonstrates capabilities that merit investigation rather than dismissal." Young War Commander Kextrol, recently promoted after exceptional performance in the Outer Rim campaigns, stood to address the assembly. "My Queen, I have reviewed recordings of the joint operations extensively. The tactical innovations achieved through human-Zephyrian cooperation exceed anything in our military archives. He activated a holographic display showing battle statistics and tactical analyses. Human unpredictability combined with Zephyrian coordination produces effectiveness multipliers of 200 to 400% over either doctrine alone. These are not marginal improvements. They represent revolutionary advances in combat capability. The data was undeniable, and even the most conservative council members studied the numbers with grudging interest. Military effectiveness was the ultimate measure of value in Zephyrian culture, and these results could not be ignored. War leader Zexmorth examined the tactical displays with ancient eyes that had seen countless battles. Impressive numbers, young commander. But what of the long-term implications? If we treat humans as equals, other species will demand similar consideration. The Dominion's authority throughout known space depends on clear hierarchy. Marcus realized this was the crux of the political problem. The Zephyrian Empire was built on the principle that stronger species naturally dominated weaker ones. Accepting humans as equals would undermine the ideological foundation of their entire civilization. Queen Vextara seemed to sense his thoughts and addressed the concern directly. War leader, I do not propose treating all species equally. I propose recognizing that strength takes multiple forms, and that understanding these forms makes us more powerful, not less. She moved to the center of the chamber, her massive frame commanding attention from all present. The Dominion has always grown stronger by incorporating the best capabilities of conquered species. We use Altarian crystal technology, Rigelian computational systems, and Centaurian agricultural methods. Why should we not also incorporate human tactical innovations? Because those species were defeated and integrated as subordinates, General Thexkar protested. You propose alliance with beings who continue to resist our authority. I propose evolution of our methods to match changing galactic conditions, the Queen replied firmly. The Voidcrawler threat demonstrates that new challenges require new responses. Clinging to outdated approaches may preserve pride, but will result in defeat. The debate continued for hours as council members argued over the implications of cooperation versus conquest. Marcus found himself studying the political dynamics with fascination, realizing that this decision would determine not just the future relationship between humans and Zephyrians, but the entire structure of power in known space. Finally, Elder War Sage Tex Miran, oldest and most respected member of the council, rose to speak. The chamber fell silent immediately, as his words carried weight that transcended rank or faction. 3 centuries ago, this council debated whether to expand beyond our home system, he said, his voice carrying the authority of age and wisdom. Conservative voices warned that leaving familiar space would weaken our culture and expose us to corrupting influences. He paused, allowing the historical parallel to sink in. Those who favored expansion argued that growth requires risk, and that strength unused becomes weakness over time. The expansion faction prevailed, and the Dominion grew to control 17 star systems. Marcus held his breath as the Elder's words shaped the direction of the debate. Now we face a similar choice, Tex Miran continued. We can maintain familiar methods that served us well in the past, or we can risk growth through incorporation of new capabilities. The question is not whether humans deserve equality. The question is whether the Dominion deserves the strength that comes from understanding all forms of power. The Elder's 4 eyes fixed on Queen Vextara with approval. Your Majesty has demonstrated that cooperation can produce greater strength than domination. I support exploring these possibilities further, with appropriate safeguards for Dominion security. The vote that followed was closer than expected. 7 council members supporting expanded cooperation, 5 opposing, and 3 abstaining. Queen Vextara had won authorization to continue joint operations, but the political price was clear. Her authority was now questioned, and future failures would be blamed on deviation from traditional methods. As the council session ended, and members dispersed to their various commands, Marcus approached the Queen with obvious concern. Your Majesty, I hope this doesn't create problems for your leadership. Queen Vextara's mandibles clicked with something that might have been amusement. Marcus Chen, leadership requires accepting responsibility for difficult decisions. Today's vote ensures that human-Zephyrian cooperation can continue to develop. That outcome justifies whatever political costs I may face. She paused, studying his worried expression. Besides, your species has taught me that strength sometimes requires sacrificing personal advantage for greater good. Perhaps it is time for Zephyrian leadership to learn this lesson as well. 1 year later, the integrated command center aboard the Joint Station Unity's hope buzzed with activity, as the largest combined human Zephyrian fleet in history prepared for the final assault against the Void Crawler homeworld. Admiral Sarah Chen worked alongside Queen Vex's Terra at the central command console, their tactical displays showing the deployment of forces that would have been unimaginable just 18 months earlier. Infiltration. Teams report successful penetration of the outer defense grid, reported Commander Park, now wearing insignia that combined human and Zephyrian rank symbols. The crawler adaptive protocols are struggling to counter mixed species tactics. Marcus stood at the communication station, coordinating between human fleet elements and Zephyrian battle groups with the ease of someone who had become fluent in both military doctrines. The war against the Void Crawlers had accelerated cooperation between the species far beyond anyone's initial expectations. Phase 2 begins in 30 minutes, Queen Vexitara announced, her forearms moving across multiple control surfaces simultaneously. All units confirm readiness for synchronized assault. The months following the High Council vote had been transformative for both species. Joint training programs had produced a generation of human and Zephyrian officers who thought naturally in terms of combined operations. Cultural exchange programs had broken down centuries of mutual misunderstanding. Most importantly, the continuing success against Void Crawler forces had proven the strategic value of cooperation beyond any political opposition. Admiral Chen reviewed the final tactical timeline with satisfaction. The Void Crawlers had been pushed back from 12 star systems through coordinated human Zephyrian operations, but their homeworld represented the ultimate test. Intelligence suggested the crawlers had been adapting their defenses specifically to counter the hybrid tactics that had proven so effective. Sarah, Marcus said, using his sister's first name in the informal communication style that had developed among the Joint Command staff. The crawler command nodes are showing new behavior patterns. They're trying to compartmentalize their responses to prevent our tactical innovations from spreading through their network. Clever, Queen Vextera observed, her mandibles clicking approvingly. They learn faster than expected. But compartmentalization creates communication delays that we can exploit. The battle that followed would become legendary in the military histories of both species. Human ships used unpredictable attack patterns to confuse crawler defenses, while Zephyrian forces provided the disciplined firepower to exploit the openings created. Mixed crews demonstrated capabilities that neither species could have achieved alone. But the real breakthrough came when Marcus, monitoring crawler communications, realized their adaptive intelligence was treating human and Zephyrian tactics as separate threats requiring different responses. The compartmentalization that should have been a defensive advantage became a fatal weakness. They're not seeing us as one force, he announced suddenly. They're trying to counter humans and Zephyrians separately, which creates gaps in their defense matrix when we act in perfect coordination. Queen Vextara understood immediately. All forces implement Protocol Unity 7, full integration, maximum coordination, synchronized assault on multiple vectors. What happened next exceeded every simulation and battle plan. Human creativity and Zephyrian precision merged into something that transcended both individual doctrines. Fighter pilots from both species flew in formations that should have been impossible, while capital ships coordinated firepower with timing measured in microseconds. The Void Crawler homeworld's defenses, optimized to counter either human chaos or Zephyrian order, collapsed completely when faced with perfect coordination that appeared completely random. In 6 hours, a threat that had menaced the entire galaxy for over a year was eliminated. In the aftermath, as victory reports came in from across the system, Marcus found himself alone with Queen Vextara on the command center's observation deck. The massive Zephyrian leader stood looking out at the combined fleet, her violet eyes reflecting something deeper than simple military satisfaction. "When I saved your life on Zerion Prime," she said quietly, "I acted on instinct to preserve combat honor. I never imagined that choice would lead to this moment." Marcus joined her at the viewport, watching human and Zephyrian ships working together to secure the conquered system. "When I helped you instead of leaving you to die, I was just trying to do what seemed right. I never thought it would change the course of galactic history." Queen Vexitara's mandibles clicked with genuine amusement. Perhaps the most important moments in history begin with individuals simply trying to do what seems right, regardless of larger consequences. So what happens now? Marcus asked. The Void Crawlers are defeated. Both our governments are committed to continued cooperation, and we've proved that humans and Zephyrians are stronger together than apart. But there are still people on both sides who see this alliance as betrayal of fundamental principles. The Queen considered the question carefully. Over the past year, she had seen her own people struggle with concepts that challenged centuries of cultural assumptions. Similarly, many humans remained suspicious of Zephyrian intentions despite repeated demonstrations of honorable behavior. Change requires time, she replied thoughtfully. My people must learn that strength can be shared without weakness, while your people must learn that hierarchy does not always mean oppression. Neither lesson comes easily to species with long histories of conflict. Marcus nodded, understanding the complexity of the challenge ahead. At least we've proved it's possible. Every successful joint mission, every mixed crew that works well together, every problem we solve through cooperation instead of conflict, all of that becomes evidence that there's a better way. Indeed, Queen Vextara agreed. And perhaps more importantly, we have created a generation of young warriors from both species who see cooperation as natural, rather than exceptional. They will build the future we have made possible. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Admiral Chen's voice came through the comm system with barely contained excitement. Marcus, Your Majesty, you need to see this. We're receiving diplomatic messages from 17 different species across the galaxy. They're all requesting information about establishing joint operations against various threats. Marcus and Queen Vextara exchanged glances of understanding. The success against the Void Crawlers had demonstrated something unprecedented in galactic relations, that cooperation between natural enemies could produce results superior to conquest or submission. It appears our experiment has attracted attention, the Queen observed. Wryly. More than that, Marcus replied, studying the incoming message traffic. It sparked hope. For the first time in galactic history, species are looking at military cooperation as an alternative to domination. Queen Vextara straightened to her full, imposing height, her forearms moving in the ceremonial gesture that indicated formal decision-making. Then we must ensure their hope is justified. The Dominion and the human alliance will serve as examples of what becomes possible when strength is measured by what we build together, rather than what we can destroy alone. As they returned to the command center to respond to the flood of diplomatic contacts, Marcus reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he had been a simple sergeant trying to buy time for civilian evacuations. Now he was helping to reshape the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. The mighty alien queen had fallen in battle, and the human she hated had carried her back from death. But what they had built together in the aftermath would outlast both their individual lives, creating possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone. In saving each other, they had discovered how to save the galaxy itself.